Welcome to Conversations with Doc Martin. This video series focuses on extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. Today is certainly no exception. We're joined by Scott Ballina. Scott is the Senior Director of Diversity, Belonging, and Giving at Citrix. In his role as Global Diversity and Inclusion and Corporate Citizenship Leader, he develops and manages initiatives to engage employees, stakeholders, and leaders to create diverse, inclusive, and equitable workplaces and communities. Prior to joining Citrix, he spent 2 years at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, leading the creation of a diversity and inclusion strategy. He spent more than 14 years at Deloitte, where he assisted his clients in solving their toughest challenges related to diversity and inclusion, employee well-being, business process design, and software implementations. Scott started his career, however, as a U.S. Navy Supply Corps officer and left the Navy after 7 years, achieving the rank of lieutenant commander. So, Scott, welcome to you.
Thanks for having me, Martin.
Yeah, I'm super excited to chat with you for a number of reasons. We met a number of years ago. Most recently, we were on one of those Vacaya vacations, and we were down there in Mexico having a good time and kind of started chit-chatting, and here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, here we are today. So, I guess I want to start, first of all, by thanking you for your service, sir. And I'm very curious. How does one go from a Navy Supply Corps lieutenant to diversity, inclusion, and employee initiatives and supply chain? Like, paint me a picture here, sir.
Yeah. I've had a very, very untraditional career. I feel like I have a little of a professional attention deficit disorder. I just like to. I like to try different things. Honestly, even how I got into the Navy was sort of circuitous. My dad was an unemployed steelworker in Pittsburgh. My mom was a secretary. There was really no money for me to go to college. Honestly, I didn't really ever dream of joining the military, but the Navy provided me an ROTC scholarship. And that allowed me to go to Penn State, and I absolutely loved it. But once I was there, one of the things that really just motivated and inspired me were the people that I got to work with, the sailors from all over the country, and getting to travel to places I had never been. I'd never been on a plane before I joined the Navy.
Oh wow!
So that was the very first time, and I did a foreign exchange with the Japanese Navy and the South Koreans. I got to go all over, sort of the Mediterranean and the Middle East, and that just, frankly, opened up a world to me that I'd read about, but had never actually, nor anyone in my immediate family had really ever experienced. And I loved it. But I didn't want to make a career out of it. And towards the end of my time in the Navy, I got to be part of a software implementation program, and Deloitte was one of the vendors, and just really liked it. Enjoyed the work I was doing. And when I left the Navy, joined Deloitte, and my full-time job was software implementations, process redesign, and implementing various kinds of software for mostly the U.S. federal government. But my side job was diversity inclusion. So I got to help start an LGBTQ employee resource group in the Washington, D.C. office. That led me, sort of when Prop 8 happened, that led me to take on a national role, helping. Deloitte's sort of original D&I program was very grassroots and office-based. But when Prop 8 happened and the subsequent sort of federal lawsuits, that made him take a much more US-wide approach. So one of the partners and I got to set up sort of that national infrastructure, and I loved it. And then that led the chief diversity officer to ask us help all the other employee resource groups to do the same thing that we did. But all this time, kind of my career was progressing with software implementation, and I was getting bigger roles and promotions, and I kind of was on the track to make partner. And part of the partner process at Deloitte is you kind of create your business case and you socialize it with groups of partners, and there's practices, and
Sure.
and I was doing all that, but part of that business case is not just sort of the money side of it, but it's like, what are you doing to make Deloitte a better place?
Okay.
And mine was all about my diversity work, for the most part. And a good friend and mentor of mine, and she and I are still in contact, after seeing me present one time, said, Scott, you are a different person up in front of that room when you talk about your diversity work. Your energy changes. You can see how much you love and care about it. And she's like, I don't know what that means, but I want you to think about that. And
Sure.
sort of a year later, I was like, I'm where I thought I always wanted to be, but I'm not sure that the next step that I thought I was going to partner was what I wanted to do. So I really kind of took a pause, and thankfully the partners that I worked for were like, Scott, we want you here in whatever capacity that may be. They were wonderful. There was a lot of self-exploration going on. And I was talking to people within the firm. Frankly, I was interviewing outside of the firm, but I had an opportunity present itself to work for Deloitte's Leadership Center for Inclusion. That was working internally and doing research, but then taking that research to clients. And they wanted someone, even though it was an internal role, that had client service experience. And that was kind of the toehold that I needed. And I spent sort of a few more years on that team, left for the Gates Foundation, and then wound up here at Citrix all these years later.
That's an amazing story. And so many people, and I guess I have to include myself in that, started out thinking they were going to go down one track,
right? And
they end up somewhere completely different.
Yeah. And my degree is in chemical engineering.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah.
Makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah. That I forgot about that part. And that's even more fascinating, right? So I guess I'd love to talk about that, the human element of this journey, if you will, because so many of my guests on this channel, that's one of kind of our focuses, and relative to, you're sitting here, you're in the Navy, you then get this opportunity presented to yourself at Deloitte, you're doing XYZ in terms of software implementation, et cetera. And then the next thing you know, by hook or by crook, and you end up in diversity and inclusion. And you mentioned that, it was kind of, I believe your words, I think, were crossroads. And so talk to us a little bit about that crossroads. Like, what went through your mind where you're like, well, I thought I was going here to be a director, and now I'm going to go over here.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
There was a lot of kind of reevaluation. That was me reflecting on what was really important to me.
Okay.
And what was going to inspire me to wake up every day. And I mean, I guess when I like coach people, I always say, we spend a ton of time at work, right? Like, it is, other than sleeping, it's probably the majority of our day, right? Is we're working. And if you're not doing something that you really care about, and that, like, is that how you want to spend every day for as long as your work life is going to be? And kind of when I really sat with that, it just made me reflect on, like, the thing that I really enjoyed about even the software stuff was running the team and getting all these disparate people to work together to achieve something, and which really is what, as I reflected back, which really is what really motivated me when I was in the Navy, right? It was, whether I was the food service officer on the ship and we were preparing 1,200 meals a day for to feed all the sailors and officers, or it was implementing SAP or PeopleSoft for a government client, or further along in the diversity career, like it was that all those people dynamics and getting all those differing points of view and creating something better than any one of us could have created on our own is what really kind of inspired me. And that's, that's the work of diversity and inclusion, right?
Absolutely.
To teach people not only how to do that, but also recognize that there's an even broader differing points of view than they even imagine.
Absolutely.
From their little, from their kind of initial worldview.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love what you said relative to, we spend so much time at work. I'm going to paraphrase and say we damn well better enjoy it. So, and that's really true. And for members of the LGBTQ plus community, I mean, and that can be a huge challenge because for so many of us, we feel like we have to hide.
Yeah.
And
I was married to a woman in the Navy during Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yeah.
So I did the ultimate hiding.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I don't know if you're aware of this. I forgot to mention to you, actually, the company I work for, Spirit Education, was just voted as one of the top companies in Arizona for diversity and inclusion, which I'm very proud of.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so we're super excited about that here at Spirit. And it's very important to us. It's very important to me, that people can live their true selves. And so, I'm kind of curious over the years, because it's been a number of years now between your current role, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and then before that with Deloitte, that it's a decent number of years now. And so I'm kind of curious the humanistic element, like how you've seen the people you've interacted with kind of change over the years relative to, feeling like they had to hide versus being more open today. Like what have you seen?
Yeah, I think there's tremendous energy from employees and in a good way that really are holding organizations to account, that they are living their values. And I think people are being kind of less shy about that, which I think is wonderful. Like and I think it really kind of opened up with Prop 8, honestly, within organizations where not that it was, I don't want to say it was sort of a political motivation, but it was that, to me, it was really one of the biggest social issues where corporate America, and that's, since I've left the military, that's largely where I've worked, push their organizations to really weigh in on social issues. And once that model was in place, that just keeps happening. And I would say that all of us are living through it in regards to racial equity, right? Right now, and we also are looking really strongly at gender equity, which continues to be this lingering problem, even though we've been working on it for decades and decades and decades. So I think that change has been really, really wonderful. That it's just a push that a lot of organizations need.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because I have a bunch of different ways that I think of the whole concept of rainbow washing that people typically use during Pride Month. We're filming this toward the end of Pride Month. It'll be debuted after Pride Month, but I sit here and I think, speaking to somebody in corporate America relative to inclusion and diversity, my thought process is, okay, so yes, there may be some companies that are kind of jumping on the bandwagon, so to speak, because everybody's doing it. But by the same token, the visibility is there that was never there before. So it's almost like a two-edged sword in a way. And I'm kind of curious how you look at this subject.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. That overall it's really wonderful. If I reflect back on, teenage Scott Ballina growing up outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who didn't feel like he fit in.
Yep.
And the the gay person I saw was Billy Crystal on Soap, right? Like
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, I mean that's I'm gonna be 50 this year, so that's kind of gives you
Welcome to the club, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the water's warmer here. It's all good. It's all
listen,
good.
I think 40s and 50s, about to be 50s, have been great, so I'm not complaining. But for someone, to see all of that and all of that support doesn't necessarily change their circumstances right this moment, but they see that there's something else out there than what they're and to me that's just a good thing. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. And I think that's an area where many of us make mistakes with this work, is that we don't allow for mistakes. One in our own growth, that and I hear this a lot when I'm doing kind of one-on-one coaching, that people are very nervous about saying the wrong thing, and it can really be just this huge barrier to engaging and growing. And like, I've screwed it up. Listen, I've said the wrong thing. I've offended people. Like, I care about this deeply, but I'm always learning and growing. And if we let that hold us back, we will never go anywhere. I think that is one thing, and whether that's personally or organizationally, you have to be willing to try some things, and it may not work out. And for those of us, with marginalized identities, we have to show a little grace to people that our intentions are really good. But may just screw it up because they don't know better. And I've never been the point of view of, you came at me wrong, and I'm going to let you know that you did. But like, it doesn't. You're not a bad person. I don't hate you. You haven't ruined our working relationship. And you may not even agree with what I tell you, but you're going to hear it, and it may not sink in this time, but it may sink in the next time you hear it from someone, someone differently. So I think that's one area that, that all of us, whether it's a, corporate company or individuals, really have a place to lean into, if you will.
Absolutely. And, when we think about leaning into it and just even dipping our toes in the water for those that may be unfamiliar or want to be more inclusive and or open, it can be kind of a scary place. And so, I've always kind of viewed myself just in my own personal life as wanting to be somebody that others can come talk to. I had a very interesting thing happen to me this week. I'm in a new to me advanced coaching program that's completing this month, and I was the peer client for the group. It was what they called a coaching intensive, and we worked through some stuff, and one of my classmates, who's a lovely woman, messages me on Facebook Messenger and said, I not everybody would accept this, I hope you're not offended, but I feel that God is working through you, and this is your call, and blah blah blah. And I was like, I'm not offended at that at all, because I understand the place from which it came. And so I thought it was actually very, very lovely. And so those are kind of the opportunities that we can all embrace to kind of move forward and build a society that's more diverse and inclusive.
Absolutely. And it's challenging right now. Like, a lot of our identities have, gotten co-opted and politicized, and it becomes parts of national debate. So it feels I think even more fraught. With tension when you don't know where someone's coming from.
It's funny you said the words politicizing our identities, and you just made my mind explode, because now that we're hopefully on the back end of COVID, I even have felt at times that I consider myself a scientist, as a dentist. I mean, my whole undergraduate and graduate degrees were in the sciences, so I consider myself a scientist, and my scientific identity got politicized relative to the science of even wearing a mask, as an example. And it's just, it is become so polarizing. But there's a lot of building we have and can do. And so when we think about building, I'd love to kind of talk a little bit relative to your tenure at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, specifically around building a diversity and inclusion initiative with the foundation, and how the building process was for you, and kind of lessons that you learned.
I've done that now both at the Gates Foundation and here at Citrix, Citrix as well. So I guess it's whether intentionally or unintentionally, it's my brand.
I love it.
So I think it's just fun to do, right?
Yeah.
For organizations that haven't been as purposeful about this topic as they could be. It's just for me, just really a really exciting moment within an organization's history to sort of undertake that. When I do it, I'm very much in receive mode, right? Like when it's to me, it's really listening to the organization. Most organizations have organizational values, and where does that fit in? And now I'm going to get like real organizational development geeky, but like competencies for their employees or their managers. And I try to be kind of really purposeful around what fits within that organization, and talk to leaders and talk to employees and see where the energy is. I think if this work has taught me nothing, and this may be a bit pessimistic, is there's some folks or some places you're just never going to win over, right? Like no matter how hard you try. And I'd rather spend my time and energy where there is energy, right? Like where there is willingness, where there is kind of opportunity for improvement and growth. So that's where I tend to focus. I usually, I typically kind of break things down, into a few areas, and there's certainly like a diversity area. So, and often that can come in the form of, okay, we just need to go, recruit, right? Like it's recruit. But I don't care what organization you are, you have diversity within your organization, right? And it's also about advancing and help and supporting those employees in their own growth and development, and potentially breaking through barriers or roadblocks that they've experienced, in the past, whether those are sort of intentional or unintentional within the organization. I focus a lot on unconscious bias, but not from a training standpoint. So I need to refer you to, so there's a good friend of mine, Lisa Kopinski, who she and her partner wrote this book, Inclusion Nudges. And it's actually building sort of systems and processes and tools to help us make less biased decisions.
Okay.
So instead of learning about bias and sitting through hours and hours of training that doesn't rewire our brain, like our brains aren't getting, you do learning. We don't learn something new in 30 minutes or 3 hours. It's that repeating over and over and over again. So I don't really focus so much on learning about bias, but how do I take that recruiting process and put in some steps that will enable those hiring managers to make different decisions, or during a performance management process that we can, we set up systems that that group of leaders are really making objective decisions about those employees' performance, not kind of leaning into assumption and bias and all those things that just happen as part of how our how our brain works. And then we do learn lastly kind of around inclusion, right? And those tools and techniques that each of us have responsibility to do to include others in our work, right? And it's so that's that's basic. That's kind of the basic framework that I use, but it's always very kind of customized to to the organization and where their needs are, and where kind of I'm hearing there's opportunities.
Absolutely. Well, I'm kind of curious when you're building these, regardless of the organization, kind of what excites you. Two questions. I'm going to give it to you at the same time. What excites you most, and what have you found has been some of the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna start sounding repetitive, but like
That's okay.
just getting to meet and talk to everyone is
Yeah.
to me like that. Just I am a classic extrovert. Like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
meeting people and
Yeah.
talking to people just like gives me so much so much energy. Like it's just and I guess I just have this sort of innate curiosity around what people's backgrounds are and what like
Yeah.
it just kind of feeds my feeds my soul.
Sure. Sure.
And from a challenges standpoint, I mean, I think, and I mentioned both racial and gender equity earlier. I think there's just some really long-term systemic issues that we have just let linger and linger and linger and linger for I mean, decades at least, but
Sure.
arguably hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Really, that we just need to sort of put our heads down and start fixing it, right? Like the time is over for like we can't or we won't or that's just the way it is, and we just have to do the work.
Yeah.
And I think that presents a problem in that like you can't make anyone do their own personal work, right? As much as I can do within an organization, if these are things we learn individually based on our culture and our society and stuff we've absorbed over our entire lifetimes. And I don't have like a little magic wand. And we all have to think and reflect and kind of unpack that for ourselves and how do we contribute to those circumstances and what can we do individually to unlearn them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think back, this was a number of years ago. We had a younger employee at Spear. He's no longer there for totally different reasons. And very nice gentleman. We had a very good relationship, and he was also very religious. And I remember at one point he made a comment almost to an offhanded manner where he said, I think being gay is a choice. And I'm like, and I literally, that's accurate because that was the orientation of our desk. So anyway, I guess I was channeling my memories of this, of the actual time. And I literally looked at him, and I think it was before I was a coach, but I still looked at him. I said, tell me a little bit more about that. And he's like, well, the research and blah, blah, blah. And so like, what research? And so we ended up having this very interesting conversation. And, then there was a certain religious connotation that came in, and we talked about that. And we had a very open and really good conversation about it. It kind of came to a let's agree to disagree place, but amicably. And it was a fascinating experience for me, like you were talking about before, relative to, as the phrase goes, inviting people at the table. I'm not so sure I changed his mind necessarily, but at least we were able to have kind of an open conversation about it. And, you made the comment that we just need to put our head down and do the work. And so, what I'm kind of curious now. I didn't think of asking you this, but what would you have told me to do in that situation?
No, I think you handled that perfectly. Those sorts of, I mean, it's so easy. Like, trust me, I get like, it's easy to get mad. It's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy to get mad. And I've been in those situations where I certainly got, I've gotten angry. But I think when we can approach any of those sorts of situations with curiosity, and really, and like what you were doing is like what is driving that, right? Like what does that person really value? And I'm sure, well, I'm not sure because I'm not that person, but sometimes because it comes to a place where, and I've had these conversations where that person genuinely cares about you, and according to their belief system, like they're really wanting to help, right? I mean, this isn't universally the case, but like when I've had some of these conversations, it was because like I really care about you, Scott, and I think this is sort of harmful. Obviously, I don't agree with them, but but at least like you sort of know what's motivating,
Mm-hmm.
that statement that you would probably have gotten angry
Yep.
at, and maybe they understand you a bit better, and you kind of understand where that,
Absolutely.
was
Absolutely.
coming from. You're making me reflect on, once I sort of came out, and with my now husband, and we have a son that's 21 years old. Once I kind of went through that whole process, and that was while I was at Deloitte. I can vividly remember a client of mine, and I was running a team, and she was a brand new client, and I walked into her office, and there was sort of a Jesus
Mm-hmm.
sign.
Sure.
And I was like, oh crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, what am I going to do? But I was like, you know what, Scott, when you kind of started on this journey, you said you were going to be you, right? Like there was no more holding back. And I kind of always took the policy of, if my coworkers or my clients are going to talk about their spouses and their children,
Yep.
then I'm going to do the same. Like,
Yep.
I did. And she blew every negative perception I had of that. Like, it made me realize how much baggage, how many assumptions I was putting into, literally all it was a sign. I knew nothing else about this woman. And my mind went 300 different places, and it was all negative.
Yeah.
And when I kind of opened the door of that conversation, we had a great working relationship. We were super friendly, and it would just be a big kind of learning point for me, that sometimes those circumstances are about us.
Absolutely.
Right? It really is about the person we're talking to.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great life lesson. And so many of us have had similar in one form or another, where it, just like the total opposite of what we're talking about, diversity and inclusion. And we have to, as human beings, we may be part of X, Y, or Z quote groups.
Right.
Yet there's all kinds of other people in the world, and we can have our own biases. Absolutely. That we don't even realize we have, that's based on experience and other sources of knowledge that we have to be careful of too. And I love that you shared that, because it is exemplary of how we all are human, and even all of us that are conscious about working on diversity and inclusion, we ourselves have to be conscious of our own internal diversity and inclusion at all times.
You describe yourself as a scientist, Martin. Like, I think the biggest petri dish for this is sitting on an airplane, and there's an empty seat next to you. You're watching every single person walk down the aisle, and our brains are just evaluating every single one of them. It's like, is this someone I want to sit next to?
Actually, I have a coworker and friend. He met his wife on Southwest Airlines because of that. I thought I love the story.
Our bias is in like overdrive.
On
airplanes.
Absolutely. So listen, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I just, I always kind of like to wrap up kind of like with kind of a kind of a big question, a heady question, if you will. And what you just shared was pretty groundbreaking in and by itself, about, watching our own internal biases. So I guess maybe I'll ask you this, and maybe it's the same answer, and that's okay. Sure. What do you think's been one of the biggest lessons you've learned in your own life journey?
So it's partly that, and I think it's also partly something I shared early. Like, don't let the fear of a misstep hold us back. Like, to me, that every time I've grown, it's when I was doing something that I was probably scared to death of. If I really, that whether that was the first time I was on stage giving a speech, or the first time I had, some of these really hard conversations about diversity, or like I screwed up and got some feedback on how I screwed up. Like, that and maybe there was a little naivety in there as well, but but that if I would have let that kind of fear stop me, I would have not had all of these wonderful experiences and not have built the relationships that I have. And I, you know, and I get it. I know it can be scary. I know it can be sometimes even paralyzing for people. But I always encourage people like to start out small and take a little risk and ask someone you feel maybe a little more safe and comfortable and knows your heart.
Yes.
But that can really just kind of blossom into something a lot bigger and richer when you're willing to be vulnerable yourself and take a little risk.
I love that. What a beautiful way to end. I really appreciate the time you spent with us and the knowledge and your life experience that you've shared. And so thanks so much for joining us today. So,
you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so for everybody else, we hope you enjoyed our little chit chat here today, and want everybody to remember, please, if you enjoyed this, please go ahead, click subscribe and click the notifications so you don't miss any one of our interviews, book reviews, or heart to hearts. And remember, life speaks to you. And if you think it doesn't, you're not listening. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.